turning sexual energy into creative power. Desire is the oldest fire in the world. It burns in the marrow of existence, flickering in the pulse of every living thing. From the slow unfurling of a flower toward the sun to the fevered longing that courses through human veins. It is the primordial force that built temples and toppled empires, that birthed symphonies and ignited revolutions. Yet, for all its raw, untamed power, desire remains one of the most misunderstood energies coursing through the human experience. We worship it, suppress it, indulge it, and fear it, but rarely do we learn to wield it with the precision of an alchemist, transmuting base metal into gold. This is the hidden art at the heart of the alchemy of desire, the sacred science of taking the molten core of sexual energy and forging it into something far greater than momentary pleasure. It is the recognition that desire, when harnessed rather than spent, becomes the fuel for creation itself. The ancients knew this secret well. In the temples of Tantra, the mystic rites of the Egyptian priesthood, and the esoteric teachings of the alchemists, there was always an understanding. Sexual energy is not merely a biological impulse, but a cosmic currency, a bridge between the flesh and the infinite. To speak of desire in this way is to enter a realm where biology and mysticism intertwine. The same force that draws lovers together is the force that compels the artist to paint through the night, the inventor to chase an elusive vision, the philosopher to wrestle with the unseen. It is no accident that the creative act and the sexual act share the same language: inspiration, climax, release, fulfillment. Both are acts of bringing something new into being, whether it is a child, a poem, or a revolution. Yet modern culture has fragmented this understanding. We have been taught to see desire as either a guilty indulgence or a mechanical function stripped of its sacred dimension. We are told to consume it or suppress it, but never to cultivate it, never to let it accumulate into something vast and transformative. The alchemist, however, knows that restraint is not denial. It is the gathering of power, like a river dammed, to build potential energy. Sexual energy, when conserved and redirected, becomes an unstoppable current of vitality and vision. Imagine, for a moment, that every suppressed desire, every unspent surge of passion, was not lost but stored like sunlight captured in the leaves of a tree, waiting to be converted into growth. What could you build with such a reservoir? What dreams could you bring to life if you stopped scattering your fire and instead focused it into a single white-hot point? This is the promise of alchemical transformation, not the extinguishing of desire, but its elevation. The journey ahead is one of both excavation and creation. We will delve into the shadowed corners of longing, where society's taboos and personal fears have buried the true potential of Eros. We will trace the golden thread that connects the ecstatic to the enlightened, the sensual to the sublime. And most importantly, we will learn the practices, both ancient and newly relevant, that allow us to become architects of our own energy, shaping it into works of art, acts of courage, and leaps of innovation. This is not merely a theory, it is an initiation. To work with desire in this way is to step into a lineage of seekers who understood that the body is not separate from the spirit. It is the crucible in which spirit is forged. The fire that heats the blood is the same fire that lights the mind. The question is not whether you will burn, but what you will burn for. There is a river that runs through every human life, though most drink from it without ever knowing its name. It is warm and turbulent, carrying a current that can intoxicate or enlighten, devour or deliver. Some call it passion, others call it lust, others still whisper its older names in languages that taste of fire and incense. But beneath all those names, it is the same primal force, sexual energy, the raw hum of life itself before it is claimed by any single purpose. It is the pulse that causes blossoms to unfold in spring, that drives the tide's ceaseless kiss against the shore, that makes galaxies curl into spirals and stars collapse into themselves in rapture. It is the first spark before form, and it dwells in us, a silent and ceaseless tide waiting to be understood. To speak of the alchemy of desire is not to speak merely of the mechanics of seduction, or of the shallow transactions that fill so much of human discourse about intimacy. It is to lean closer to a far older mystery, one that shamans, mystics, poets, and magicians have known in fragments and guarded with riddles. For sexual energy is not simply a currency to be spent in the bedroom or in private fantasies. It is, at its core, a forge of transformation. The ancients imagined alchemy as the art of turning lead into gold. In truth, that was always a metaphor. The real transmutation was not of metal, but of the human soul. The refining of the dense, instinctual forces of life into something luminous and enduring. And sexual energy, so easily squandered in moments of fleeting pleasure, is perhaps the most potent raw material for such inner alchemy. When we first sense this current within us, it arrives as heat, as ache, as desire pulling toward another body. It feels ungovernable, a tide that overpowers the mind. Most are taught only two ways to meet it: indulgence without awareness, or repression without understanding. Both lead to stagnation. The first dissipates the energy in a haze of brief gratification, the second traps it, where it ferments into frustration, resentment, or shame. But the third way, the way of the alchemist, is to recognize the sacred architecture hidden within that longing and to guide it upward, transforming its raw fire into creative power, insight, and connection to something vast. In this way, sexual energy is not opposed to spirituality or creativity, but is their root. Think of a great artist in the white heat of inspiration, brush, moving as though guided by some divine breath. Think of a visionary scientist who spends sleepless nights chasing the elegant curve of a new equation. Think of a leader whose words ignite movements, not through cold logic alone, but through a fierce, magnetic presence. In each of these, sexual energy has been harnessed, not for physical union, but for birthing something into the world, painting a theory, a revolution. The act of creation, whether physical or metaphysical, draws from the same well, in truth. The distinction between sexual energy and creative energy is an illusion born of language. They are one river with many branches. In the human body, this river rises from the depths, from the primal centers that govern survival and pleasure, and if allowed to flow freely, moves through the heart, infusing it with compassion and connection, then ascends further still, lighting the mind with visions and possibilities. When blocked, it can swirl chaotically in the lower realms, driving compulsions and obsessions. When guided upward, it becomes a current of genius, a sustaining fire for long labors, a lens that sees into the heart of things. Yet the path of this transformation is not simply a matter of technique or mental discipline. It requires a shift in the way we perceive desire itself. For most of us have been taught to fear its intensity, to see it as an unruly animal needing to be tamed, or worse, as a sign of weakness or impurity. But what if desire were neither a sin to be crushed nor a master to be obeyed blindly, but a messenger a divine envoy speaking in the language of sensation, telling us not only what we want, but what we could become if we allowed that longing to deepen rather than dissipate. The alchemy begins when we stop asking merely, how do I satisfy this urge? And start asking, what is this energy trying to become through me? That question changes everything. Instead of falling into the well-worn grooves of habit, the energy is invited into a new architecture. It may flow into art, into the patient building of a skill, into the courage to speak a truth that has lived too long in silence. It may awaken new compassion, not only for the beloved, but for the whole trembling world. And as it does, the very self begins to shift, expanding beyond the narrow boundaries of appetite into the vast terrain of purpose. To speak in cosmic terms, sexual energy is stardust remembering itself. It is the echo of the great creative burst that gave rise to all form, condensed now into the human vessel. We stand, each of us, as miniature universes, with this original fire still burning inside. We can scatter it in small sparks, and there is no shame in the warmth of such embers, or we can learn to gather it, concentrate it, let it become a steady flame, capable of illuminating far more than our own immediate hunger. This is the art and the challenge of transmutation. And so, the alchemy of desire is not merely about controlling or redirecting sexual energy. It is about reclaiming the wholeness of the human being, integrating body, heart, and mind into a single instrument through which life can play its most exquisite music. It is about learning to feel without being ruled, to burn without being consumed, and to create without depleting the source. It is both an intimate journey inward and a cosmic dance outward. For the same current that fuels our personal longing is also the heartbeat of the stars. In the pages that follow, we will explore this mystery not as dry theory, but as living practice, symbolic myth, and tangible transformation. We will walk through the core principles that guide this path, the deeper archetypal stories that illuminate it, and the ways it can root itself in the soil of everyday life. But for now, let this be the first sip from the river, warm, strange, and ancient, carrying within it the possibility that every desire, no matter how earthly, contains a seed of the divine, waiting only for the right conditions to bloom into something that outlasts the moment.